In the year 1743, a Bavarian prince gave the strangest order his household had ever received. He commanded that every clock in his palace be removed. Not stopped, removed. Every timepiece, every hourglass, every sundial in the gardens, carried out through the gates and never brought back. He forbade the ringing of bells. He forbade his servants from speaking the hour aloud. He forbade any mention of the date. And then he lived inside that palace with no way to measure time for the next 30 years until he died. What made the order so shocking was who gave it. Because Ludwig von Aschau was, of all men, the last one anyone expected to wage war on time. Until that year, the prince had been famous for exactly one thing: his obsession with order. He ran his estate like a machine. Every task had its hour. Meals were served to the minute. His servants set their routines by his clocks, of which he owned more than any nobleman in the region. A collection of them, in fact, imported at great expense, each one precise, each one wound personally by the prince himself every morning. He was a man who worshipped the measured hour, which is what makes what happened next so difficult to explain. Because in the winter of 1743, Ludwig von Aschau, the most punctual man in Bavaria, had every clock he owned carried out of his home and never allowed one to return. Something happened that winter. The records do not say what. There is a gap in the prince's meticulous journals, a few weeks in which his careful daily entries simply stop. When they resume, the handwriting is different, smaller, tighter, and a servant's account, preserved separately, notes that the prince came back from those weeks changed in a way the household could not name. Quieter, watchful, and unwilling to be alone in a room where a clock could be heard ticking. The first instruction he gave, on the first page after the gap, was the order to remove every clock. Whatever happened in those missing weeks, it turned the most time-obsessed man in Bavaria into a man who spent the rest of his life at war with time itself. And he organized everything around a single strange conviction: that time, if you refuse to measure it, cannot finish what it has started. The household adapted. They learned to work by the sun without naming the hour, and to serve meals when the prince grew hungry rather than when a bell struck. Guests, however, never adapted. A visiting diplomat left a written account of his stay that survives to this day. He described being asked to surrender his watch at the gate and a growing dread over the hours or days he stayed of not knowing how long he had been inside. He wrote that he left the palace feeling as though he had stepped out of the current of the world and only just found my way back. The prince, by contrast, seemed to grow calmer every year, as though the absence of time was doing exactly what he had hoped, holding something at bay, keeping something from arriving, because that was what the clocks had been about all along, not the passing of time, the arrival of something he was certain that time would bring, and what he believed was coming. What he spent 30 years using an entire palace to keep away is written in his own hand in the single document he left behind. The document was found sealed inside the hollow base of a removed sundial decades after the prince's death, hidden, it seems, so that it would only be read once he was gone. It is a letter addressed to no one, and it explains what happened in those missing weeks of 1743. The prince wrote that winter a visitor had come to the palace. The letter says almost nothing about him, only that no one knew where he had come from, that he arrived on foot with no carriage and no servant, stayed a single night, and was gone before dawn. No one saw him leave. No one ever saw him again. But before he left, he told the prince one thing, the exact date on which the prince would die. Not a vague prophecy, a specific day, a specific year. And the prince, to his own horror, believed it completely. What the letter describes next is not panic. It is the mind of a man famous for order, turning the full force of his precision against a single problem. The prince reasoned like this: a date is only a measurement. A specific day means something only if time is being counted toward it. Remove the counting, every clock, every calendar, every spoken hour, and the appointed day has no way to arrive. It stays forever in an unreached future, because nothing in his world is measuring its way toward it. So he stepped outside time. He removed every instrument that could mark a single day's passing and tried to live in an endless, unmeasured present, a present that could never tip over into the one future he feared. It was, in his words, the only defense against a day that has already been named. For 30 years, it seemed to work. And then the prince's journal, the timeless, undated journal he kept to the very end, records one final entry. It reads, "I am told the visitor has been seen again on the road below the valley. I do not know how he found his way back. I will not ask him why he has come. As long as I do not ask, I do not know. And as long as I do not know, it cannot yet be today." That is the last thing Ludwig von Aschau ever wrote. He was found dead soon after. And his household, honouring his rule to the very end, recorded no date. No one wrote down the day he died. Not on his tomb, not in the estate records, nowhere. Which means the one fact that would tell us whether the visitor was right, whether the prince died on the named day, or cheated it for 30 years, or was simply a frightened man who believed a stranger, is the one fact he made certain no one could ever know. He spent 30 years building a life in which that question could never be answered, and he succeeded so completely that it never has been. So, I will leave you with the question the prince refused, to his final breath, to ask. If a stranger told you the exact day you would die, and something in you believed him, would you count the days you had left? Or would you do what he did? Throw every clock out of your life, refuse to measure a single hour, and gamble that a day you never let yourself reach can never quite arrive? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. He was the most punctual man in Bavaria, and he spent the last 30 years of his life making certain that no clock, no calendar, and no living soul would ever again be able to tell him what time it was, because he had decided that the moment he knew would be the moment it was too late. If you want to know about the palace that a single sandstorm buried completely in one night, with everyone still inside and the doors locked from within, that story is coming next. Subscribe, and I will see you there.